Okay, with the work on the Blackthorn finished, I'm going to move to the realm of, shall we say, real spacecraft, real craft, and do what I jokingly referred to when I talked to my local hobby shop about it as an archaeology project. What I'll be working on is the classic Space Shuttle and 747, dating back to 1977. This is the, it's the original boxing, dating back to when Enterprise was the shuttle doing the flying. There is a lot of plastic here, and what detail there is fairly simplistic and mostly in the form of raised panel lines, although it looks like there may be a few recessed panel lines on the wings of the 747. I mean, this thing's a monster. But, you've got all the bits to put together a 747, a base, and the landing gear, as well as the bracing to mount a space shuttle on the top. That would be the aerodynamic fairing that goes on the back of the shuttle, notably used during Enterprise testing or during ferry flights. And then we come to sprues that anyone who has built the Revell 1/144th scale space shuttle should be very familiar with, as they haven't changed since 1977. If you were to buy a 1/144th Revell space shuttle today, this is still the kit you would be getting. Raised panel lines, simplistic details, the opening and closing cargo bay hatches, which I will probably be gluing closed, just because I intend this to be in flight on the back of the 747. For the 747, the decals I'll be using, while I'm going to try to use the kit supplied decals. I have scanned these so that I can print off a new copy if I need to. You can see that the years have not been kind. These have yellowed. I've also picked up, for the shuttle itself, some decals from Warbird Decals, which will help me to much better detail this kit. I've also got a set of tiles for the bottom on the way. But this one's going to be a lot of work. I'm expecting it to be anyway, mostly due to the vintage of the kit. We'll see how things go. Okay, as you can see, I've got the fuselage of the 747 glued together. The strips of electrical tape are basically acting as clamp on troublesome parts of the seams. And as you can see, as expected given the lineage of the kit, we have a massive seam down the middle of the aircraft. Sad part is, with these being raised panel lines, fixing a lot of this is not easy. I have a choice. I can fix the seam or I can keep the panel lines. I'm trying to kind of hit a happy medium in there, but you can see I'm having some success. But all in all, this one's going to have its share of warts. Alright, continuing work. We've got the tail planes done. They've got some decent detail on them, and more importantly, went together without needing any clamping, which is more than I can say for their main wing counterparts. Although, truth be told, I'm happy that I didn't need more clamping than I did on them. I remember back in the day I'd have had clothespins all the way up the length. But that's also the advantage of using Tamiya glues. Well, work continues. Alright. Here we have the engine nacelles for the 747. I haven't mounted them yet, but I have coded which pair is which with the help from a Sharpie. I'll install them after I get the wings installed, but right now I just wanted to get them done. Alright, construction, as can be seen here, has taken a tremendous leap. Main assembly of the 747 is finished. Still waiting to install the braces for the shuttle. One complaint I've got about this, and this draws back to the fact that the 747 kit dates back to the late 70s, is that while based on the illustrations you know that the front strut lines up in these window holes, there is nothing telling you where to mount the back struts. So what I'm going to wind up doing is taking the shuttle itself and use it to make the measurements. All in all, though, given the age of the model itself, it's actually turning out pretty good. The landing gear doors on the bottom don't look terribly good, but their fit was only okay. But before this turns into a rant, we'll get going again. Alright, after taking some measurements off the shuttle, transposing them on the hull of the 747 here, I've got the braces in line. Theoretically, based off how I've got the pegs lined up, they should be in the right orientation. Would have been really nice if it had been, actually marked where those should go, but I can't complain too loudly. The kit's dang near 50 years old. Alright, working on the orbiter now. As you can see, I've got quite a bit of it done. I've gone ahead and glued the beaver tail in place. That's the angle that'll match the aerodynamic fairing if I decide to use it. There are some not so pleasant seams. Rudder's looking good. I was glad this seam has no detail around it. I've gotten it sanded fairly smooth. I'm hoping the decals will help deal with the rest of it. Ignore the gray on the nose here. That was filled with sprue goo to help deal with the seamage there. I've gone ahead and glued in the glass. Not too worried about obscuring it because there's nothing behind it to obscure. The bay doors are in place with some glue to help hold, some tape to help hold them together in the back. Once this all sets up, we'll be ready to put the wings on her. This is getting together pretty quick. Alright, at this point, barring the main engines, assembly of the orbiter itself is finished. There's a decal that covers most of that plate, which is from the new sheet, which is why I haven't put the main engines in. That, and I'm still thinking about using the aerodynamic fairing. I've got the wings on. Got some sprue goo in the gap on that one. And a mix of sprue goo and perfect putty on the underside. At this point, I just need to put the landing gear doors in, and the orbiter will be more or less ready. Alright, here we have her mocked up with the shuttle and 747 together. It is not a small model in any sense of the word, but all in all, I'm liking how it's coming out. Some of the fit issues on things like the doors drive me crazy, but until I get my hands on a newer tooled version of this ship, there's just not a whole lot I can do about that. Okay. Setting aside the 747 and Revell shuttle for a moment, figure we'll continue this modeling archaeology experiment to its logical conclusion by adding the old Airfix shuttle and boosters, mostly picked because I've seen online where this kit is actually more accurate than the Revell kit. It's showing its age too. Of course, it should be pointed out that all of the old Space Shuttle kits actually came out before Columbia's first flight. Now, the one gripe I've seen online with this kit is sitting right here. It's the one major gripe. That is the link between the oxygen and the hydrogen tanks on the external fuel tank. And you'll notice it is smooth. We have a workaround for this, though, in the form of some Plastruct that will give me my rib details. Like with the Revell kit, this, like I said, it's showing its age because, the decals are very, very yellow. Luckily, like with the Revell kit, I won't be using the decals. Couple of major differences between the two kits. It does use two halves of the fuselage, but the center thrusters, which, yeah, there they are, on the nose of the fuselage are a separate piece to avoid a seam running down the middle of them. And as is standard in modern Airfix kits, the wings are, the bottom is mostly one piece with the top pieces stuck over the top. Another thing I like about this kit versus the Revell kit is the bay doors. There's no hinge. You're either building them open or closed. I also like that the windows are molded in separate pieces. But we'll get started on this and continue work on the other one too. Alright, working on the external tank. As you can see, I've got the main parts glued together, although there is a bit of a seam I'll need to address, as well as the holes for where the base was going to go through. On the connection piece, opted instead of using the sheet plastic that I'd originally intended to use some just regular masking tape to give the ribbed effect. I'm liking how it looks. We'll see how it all goes together. Alright, have completed construction on the external tank, including a ton of fiddly bits in the back here with the fuel inlets. I'm going to give them kudos for detailing it. This long pipe running the length of the tank was fun to put on because it got seriously warped. I wound up bracing it with a bunch of masking tape while it sat. But that's ready to roll. The SRBs are currently under construction. We'll have them finished shortly. Alright, have completed construction on the external tank, including a ton of fiddly bits in the back here with the fuel inlets. I'm going to give them kudos for detailing it. This long pipe running the length of the tank was fun to put on because it got seriously warped. I wound up bracing it with a bunch of masking tape while it sat. But that's ready to roll. The SRBs are currently under construction. We'll have them finished shortly. Okay, and here we have the completed solid rocket boosters with the mountings for the shuttle, as well as the separation motors. At this point, we are getting really close. Gonna be time for paint soon. Okay, painting has begun. Can't really tell it by looking at the SRBs, but they've now been given a coat of Vallejo flat white primer. The external tank was given a coat of white primer. I've started painting it in a different color. I'm using Tamiya's metallic orange. At this point, I'm figuring it's going to be close enough for my purposes. We'll see how everything looks when I get her all put together. And after their coat of white, we have the Orbiter Enterprise. Took a couple of runs to get the sprue goo to disappear on the bottom, but not too worried about it because I've got the decals that are going to be covering that. Wasn't worried about masking the windows because there's nothing behind them. And then we've got the Airfix version, also in white primer. Again, the sprue goo took a little work to get rid of. But all in all, we're moving right along. Okay, what we have now is one very white 747 With all the painting I've done today, I pretty much killed the white rattle can stuff I've got. But we've got this all nice in one color. And then it'll be time to do things like mask and paint the wings and all that fun stuff. But that's where we're sitting. Alright, what we've got now is the beginnings of detail paint on the 747. I masked off the areas that were supposed to stay white and painted the rest in Games Workshop's Gray Sear. I've still got some metallics to do on that, but we're definitely moving right along. Alright, as you can see, she's no longer silver in any way, shape, or form, nor is she going to be. I've opted to go ahead and paint her up like the shuttle carrier that actually took Enterprise to its final resting place at the Intrepid Museum, which means the white with the gray underside. The wings stayed pretty much the same. Got the metallics on, got metallics on the engines. Next stop will be the decals, which I picked up from an outfit called Draw Decals. And we will get this thing gloss coated for that. Okay, we've got some decals on the boosters and external tank, mostly on the boosters. The decals, as well as some supplemental handwork with paint markers. The decals are actually from a copy I found of the Revell 40th anniversary shuttle set. And I used the instructions from that to put at least some of the detail on the boosters. Slowly but slowly. Alright, decaling is done on the 747 for the Enterprise. Now, originally I had intended for these long stripes to be decaled from a sheet I picked up, but given the length of the stripe, I ran into a problem with them curling under themselves. So I wound up hand painting the stripe and then touching it up. All in all, though, I don't think it looks too bad. It gets the job done. The decals on the rudders are from the sheet, as are the decals for the nose. Okay, decals and painting are now done on the Revell 1144th shuttle, which in this case was done as Enterprise as she last appeared. Most of the decals worked out fairly well. There are a whole lot of more decals I opted not to put on this shuttle. The tile effect is from a sheet, well, actually all of the decals are from a pair of sheets by Warbird Decals. Biggest reason I went for that was to be able to do this and make the bottom actually look like tiles rather than just being painted black. Now, I realize Enterprise never actually had the tiles installed, but while at the Smithsonian, she did look to be painted like she had the tiles, so that's how she wound up. All in all, I realize that it's not perfect, but I'm going to be honest, at this point, I'm happy with it. All right, here we have the Airfix shuttle, marked up as Discovery. I used the same Warbird decal sheet that I did on the Revell version. There were only a couple of minor issues using that versus one specifically designed for this. Ironically enough, the only real problem I ran into is right here. You can see where I had to make a splice because the decal for the bottom of the shuttle didn't quite match up with what I was working with. All in all, though, like with Enterprise, it's not perfect, but I'm liking it. Okay, after much to do and many fits and starts, we're going to call the adventure in modeling archaeology, aka the 1144th shuttle builds, done. We'll start appropriately with the shuttle that started it all, i.e. the shuttle that, as a picture I found online calls it, the USS Not Going Anywhere, aka the Space Shuttle Enterprise, which was originally built to be the test frame for the glide tests. Now in this case, I've got her as she looked, more or less as she looks today, rather than as she looked during the tests. The SCA has been done up in the more or less final colorations of that the craft used, rather than the old American Airlines livery. Decals, the draw decals for the decals for the striping here didn't work the way I wanted them to. I probably could have succeeded if I'd cut them down, but at this stage they're painted, and all in all, while the Enterprise, with its tail fairing in place, because even at the end they were flying with the tail fairings, looks the part. Oop. Luckily it's not on a base or anything. I'm happy with how it turned out. It's got some rough patches, I admit, but all in all, Enterprise looks all right. Now we go to the Airfix shuttle and boosters, which dates from the same era as the Revell kit. And in fact, as I mentioned before, the markings I'm using on the boosters are actually from the 40th anniversary Revell kit. All the markings on the shuttle are actually from the Warbird decals markings for the Revell kit, but for the most part they worked. You can't really tell where the biggest problems came in because they came in on the underside. All in all, this one looks more or less launch ready. The color for the external tank may not be right, but at this point I'm happy with how it looks. And I will apologize for rambling and somewhat repeating myself, but at this stage these are both about ready. I've got to reattach the nose to the tanks, but these are both about ready to go on final display here at the workshop. I'll put some stills at the end of this, and thank you all for watching.